Good evening, everyone. I am Lisha Dore, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to One-on-One, where we bring to you some of the best minds in Trinidad and Tobago. Tonight, we are discussing a topic that may seem a little bit abstract at first, but it is one that is deeply relevant to our society. And that topic is cultural trauma. We thought that this was a particularly timely conversation because just a few days ago, Trinidad and Tobago would have celebrated Indian Arrival Day. And on that day, we reflected on the journey, the sacrifices, and the contributions of the Indian indentured laborers who would have arrived on our shores at the beginning of 1845. In just a couple of months, Trinidad and Tobago will observe Emancipation Day, remembering the end of slavery and honoring the resilience and achievements of those who would have endured that very painful chapter of our history. So on those occasions, I mean, those of you all who may have visited Trinidad and those of us who live in Trinidad, we know there's a lot of merriment on the occasions of Indian Arrival Day and Emancipation Day. But we need to remember that these are more than just public holidays. And they're occasions that encourage us to reflect on where we came from, the experiences that shaped our communities, and how the past continues to influence the present. Now, some of the questions at the heart of tonight's discussion are, do the experiences of our ancestors still affect us today? Can the hardships, struggles, and injustices faced by previous generations leave lasting impact on our families and our communities? And how do we honor those experiences while continuing to move forward as a nation? So, ladies and gentlemen, I invite you all to stay tuned. We have a very insightful conversation tonight. And joining us this evening is Mrs. Victoria Siewnarine-Geelalsingh, President of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists. Mrs. Siewnarine-Geelalsingh is a clinical psychologist with more than a decade of experience. She's a strong advocate for mental health and wellness, greater collaboration across sectors, and the continued development of psychological services and training throughout Trinidad and Tobago. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to all our viewers who are joining us on Zoom and social media, as well as members of the media who will be tuning in. We are live on Facebook and YouTube, so please share the live. We are absolutely thrilled to have all of you with us tonight. As always, we aim to make this session as interactive as possible. I say that week after week, so we encourage you to actively participate. Raise your hand if you want to make a contribution, or feel free to share any questions or comments you have on the chat. We will have a segment where Mrs. Siewnarine-Geelalsingh will be taking your questions and giving you the appropriate answers and so on. And of course, last but not least, I want to say welcome to my esteemed co-host, Dr. Donnie Rogers, who will give his opening remarks and kick off tonight's discussion. Donnie, over to you.
Thank you, Lisha. Good night to our guests and good night to our esteemed co-panelists. I think this issue couldn't come at a better time, where, as you said, we just came out of Indian Arrival Day and we're heading into Emancipation Day. Psychology is not my forte, and I will, stay in my lane. So I wouldn't say much.
Donnie, we are broadening our horizons on this program.
Exactly.
Broadening our horizons.
And exactly on that, I mean, it's not my forte, but I was going to say this to me is a learning experience in which, we always have that learning curve in this program, if not for us, for the viewers and, extended persons. So I wouldn't take up much time. I am very interested in what our guests have to say. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me on your program. And to all of the persons looking, welcome. as for many of these talks, one of the first things that I like to ask people to do is get a notepad and a pen, or maybe find a note app on your phone or whatever device you're using, because one of the best ways to be able to heal psychologically is to become more aware of things, so just to answer some questions in our minds. And there's a phenomenon called the aha moment, where sometimes things don't necessarily make sense to you, but later on they do. And I'm hoping that if you take notes, then if not for the period that this podcast lasts, that maybe afterwards you may be able to benefit from some aha moments, and be able to improve some things in your life, even if those things are just a little more self-awareness, which we can all benefit from. So, yes, so we are talking about cultural trauma today. Thank you very much for the introduction. And, when we speak to cultural trauma, a lot of what you all were describing is like a deeper sense of cultural trauma, which is intergenerational trauma. And that, it starts from our history. And Alicia, you did say, how much of that, the question is how much of that still affects us today? And it certainly does still affect us today. And when we look at cultural trauma now, we are looking at the individual things that happen in society in present day that affects not only the me or the you, but the we. So when you think cultural trauma, you're thinking we. And yes, an element of that is that intergenerational trauma, because you almost have these borrowed defense mechanisms that would have come from that intergenerational trauma, right? So I'm speaking Trinidad and Tobago, 97% in school. What's the first thing the parents say? Where's the next 3%? Right? And so we have that conditionality, and that's part of our intergenerational trauma. But today I want to focus more on what happens currently, presently, the things that happened last week, the things that happened today, the things that happened yesterday. And it in no way at all is to dismiss the effects of the things that might have happened a really long time ago, because we certainly appreciate it and it does impact us. But we also need some tools to deal with everyday life. And life gets really difficult, especially when we have social media, we have the news, and what sells? If you think about the headlines, you know, um, somebody being kind at school isn't something that's going to make the headline, right? The fights are what makes the headlines. And if police directed traffic and it was a free flow of traffic and there was no traffic or no extra time getting into Port of Spain, that doesn't take the news. But when there's gridlock, it's on the news. And so we need to think about our expressions when those things happen in real life. When you are stuck in traffic and you are going to be late, now traffic is something that we cannot control, right? We get upset. I'm saying you, but it should be we. We get upset. We get irate. We want to know, why isn't it moving? We look at our watches, we look at the time, the radio and the music can't soothe us anymore. And we get really, really upset for this thing that we have absolutely no control over. But if we had the ability to now look at what's happening, understand it for what it is. This is an external event happening in my external environment, to which I happen to be privy to the effects of it because of my current positioning. This is not my life. This is not my always. This just happens to be where I am right now. And when we move ahead, we may see that there's an accident, and that's not something to be compassionate about. That's not something to be upset about. It's never a good thing to see that, somebody is hurt or injured or anything like that. So if all the way in the beginning we are able to set ourselves in that space, then we are able to express that more helpful emotion later on, which is compassion. However, if in the beginning we're upset about it, then when we get to the accident and we realize that there's an accident, we judge. Sure, that one was speeding. Sure, that one I should look down from must be try to overtake, and we judge, and that's what we do. Now, is it human nature to do that, or is it trauma? And that is something that we need to speak about. An accident, seeing two vehicles smashed on the side of the highway, is supposed to have some level of trauma. Somebody is supposed to have a typically functioning person should have a trauma response to something like that. However, we see it and we hear about it so often that now it has become our sense of norm. And we need to be really vigilant about the things that we allow ourselves to accept as a sense of norm. And I'll give you an example. A lot of us, we say things like, well, me, I don't like that. That's just how I am. And every time you say that's just how I am, it means that somewhere in the past, there was a trauma, there was an overcompensation, and you've adopted this way now. People who say, I don't like hugs, that's just how I am. Or people who say, I don't like to interact with people in work, that's just how I am. It usually comes from some form of trauma. And that trauma now gives you some kind of overgeneralization. So when we look at Trinidad and Tobago, and we look at healing Trinidad and Tobago, one of the things, or rather, I would say the most important thing that we need to look at is how do we heal Trinidad and Tobago from trauma, from this collective trauma that is not the you, it's not the I, but it is the we. So what we're doing now, it's not therapy, it is what it is, it's rebuilding a sense of safety. It's also rebuilding a sense of agency that each person believes that they have the power to impact something. And I say this every opportunity I get on these programs, on media programs, when I deliver seminars or talks, I say that we are all responsible for the things that are happening around us because we can either do something about it or we can not do something about it. And if you are not doing something about it, then you are also contributing to it. So that is one of the things, if you're taking notes, that I'd like you to write down. If you are living in an environment where things are happening and you are not doing something about it, then you are contributing to it. Why is that? It's because we all have power. So you may think, well, what can I do? I can't do anything. I have no power. Well, a lot of people, they interact with parents, they interact with friends, they interact with children. Persons who are parents, that's the biggest job right there. Parenting. That is how you heal Trinidad and Tobago. You adjust your parenting style, you increase the amount of resources that you have. It sounds very easy. It's not, but it sounds very easy. And you become very intentional about how you train the children around you. And so by parenting intentionally, you are now able to heal Trinidad and Tobago. You're not going to heal it tomorrow, but you may heal the Trinidad and Tobago that will exist in 10 years or in 20 years. Now imagine if each person in Trinidad does one thing to heal Trinidad and Tobago, because it's not the I, it's not the you, it's the we. Then in a matter of years, we will start to see the changes of the things that we are doing now. So it's almost a non-negotiable first step. Look at yourself and be able to identify, what have I considered as norm? What is normal to me? If I hear about violence, or if I hear about a robbery, or if I hear about a kidnapping, is that normal to me? And if it is normal to you, then you look yourself in the mirror and you say, I am a victim of cultural trauma. I need to be able to do something about this. So what can we do? What can we, how then can we be able to now affect this change? And I wish, might I ask, Alicia, is this an open forum? Sorry, that people can ask questions straight away?
We will work with whatever format you are comfortable with, Victoria. I mean, if you wish to ask questions, I'm sure I'm seeing Richard here, I'm seeing Trinity the Bone here. there's a saying, be careful of what you ask for, because there are some people who like to talk and talk and talk, and they may
Well,
not give you a chance.
I wonder if they can put their questions in the chat and then maybe
Okay, certainly,
discussion.
certainly.
Yes,
Um,
if I see them, I can answer them.
to our attendees, please feel free put any questions you may have, or if you on the chat, or if you want to make a contribution, ask a question yourself, feel free to raise your hand, and I will just go through social media to see if there are any questions
Yeah,
on this topic.
thank you.
Right?
Sorry, I should have said that at the beginning.
That's all right. So maybe Donnie, if you want to interject a little here, feel free.
You know what? Something you touched on there, it's about parenting. And, as a parent, we would know what we have experienced as a child growing up. And sometimes it's very simple things. And, when you have kids, you want to look at, what I term, breaking that generational curse. So, growing up, your grandparents, if you're kind of talking sometime, hey, hush them up, and that would lead to someone who's timid, right? Even with my daughters now, I mean, within reason, we don't really subject them to, that sort of saying. Generally, we allow them to explore and choose certain careers and that within reason, because sometimes as parents, I mean, your job is to guide, but we support them, and for me, they are given support in ways in which either wasn't afforded to us or wasn't done for us, right? And when I look at it comparatively, I think that my daughters, when I compare, with age, they are way more advanced than I was, and looking at that, you tell yourself, okay, you're doing something okay. You may not be perfect, but you're doing something okay. So when you talk about parenting, that actually hit the nail on the head with regards to the generational curse and how do we move forward from it.
Congratulations on that. There aren't a lot of parents who are able to make that conscious decision and make it stick. So what you would have done was you parented intentionally because you knew what you experienced, and so you on purpose or intentionally did something different. But to use your example, if you don't mind, a lot of us, I hear a lot of people say things like, well, I get licks and I turn out fine. And while I argue about that, I say, well, did you really turn out fine? Because for a lot of us, it was trial and error, right? We had to figure it out. We had to begin to learn. And so I would say it's not about doing the opposite all the time. And I always say this is another thing you would always hear me say, is people do the best they can with the resources they have at that point in time. And your parents, my parents, other parents, maybe they did things because they didn't have additional resources at that point in time. Now we would have grown and learned, and we would able to recognize the things that maybe were not helpful for us. And for some people who have more resilience, they are able to say, my parents did that to me, so I'm not going to do it to my child. But when they don't do it, you also have to balance that discipline with allowing them to do certain things. Otherwise, you're going to end up with entitled children. So if you don't balance the discipline and the freedom, then you're not going to end up with children who are geared towards success. And so it means that if you can speak just from how you're speaking, I'm assuming that you have a good relationship with your daughters and all of that, which I would say is successful parenting. But a lot of people, they try to fix their past or their trauma history with their children. And what that means a lot of the times is they do the exact same things that was done to them when they were parents, but they expect that the result is going to be different. And now for those parents, what I would say, I won't say that they're bad parents, because I don't believe that there are bad parents within reason. I would say that they don't have the benefit of those additional resources. I see someone in the chat said positive influences, and then oh, sorry, I thought that was a question. Sorry about that. Yes. So yes, and just to draw from that comment, thank you. It is positive, but it's more than positive. And you see, I think we get carried away about when we think about positivity, because you can't put if you put a shiny object on top of a ruined table, it's not going to fix the table, right? But it's about being intentional. So if you intentionally sand the table and intentionally repaint the table, then you get a product that has now itself been improved and not just covered. So I think sometimes we distract ourselves by saying positive things, when really we need to look at the intentionality and the effort that exists behind certain things. So if we were to take that and go back to cultural trauma, one of the things I want to do is talk about how it's relevant to something that's happening right now. So, long ago, Trinidad was what? We linemen. Everybody linemen. Friday, Saturday, you drive around your linemen. People's gates are open. They're on the road. They're parked up there. It's not necessarily something that you see a lot of anymore. And the reason we don't see that a lot anymore is because of what's happening in our nation and what has been happening for many, many years. This is not just current, but I'm using that as an example to say that even the cultural fabric of Trinidad and Tobago is now being suppressed by this trauma that we are all experiencing. And that trauma is a lot to do with helplessness. So persons feel as though they can't change it. It just exists and it is what it is, and we have to live our lives just with that. And it goes to a lot of things. It's not just, I've been using the examples of I've been using the examples of crime and parenting and these things, but it's more than just that. It's how people choose to live their lives. It's how people choose to socialize. It's the parts of our culture that we choose to keep. It's segregation, it's isolation. A lot of these things that we are seeing comes from that trauma for things that are happening now. And so the individual, so that's the I and the me, but also the collective nervous system of ourselves is unmanaged. So imagine Trinidad and Tobago is an organism, and Trinidad and Tobago has a nervous system. The way we might feel nervous in the pits of our stomach or in our throat when we have something coming up, that anxiety that we feel. Imagine Trinidad and Tobago as an organism feeling that nervousness. It is going to rock every single person that exists on our land. If we have an earthquake throughout, it's going to shake everybody. And so we need to be very deliberate, and we need to have collective processes on how we deal with this. And a big part of that is empowering persons. And, I go back to the parenting. Parenting doesn't only need to be adult parents to young children. We can use that element of parenting and we can apply it to relationships. So maybe a best friend or maybe a sibling, or it could go the other way. It doesn't have to go parent to child. It could go adult child to older parent, right? Where we are able to have conversations. And the key or the trick is non-threatening conversations. So in other words, I'm not having this conversation with you to try to change your mind, to tell you to think like me. I'm having this conversation with you to try to get you to understand another perspective. Yeah? So how are we then?
Very good. Victoria, I just want to touch on a few of the things you would have mentioned. Now, you spoke about the need for healing Trinidad and Tobago, right? So what are some, and I agree with you, I think there is a need to heal Trinidad and Tobago from trauma at different levels. If we observe what's taking place in Trinidad and Tobago right now, we do have a lot of violence that permeates the society. we have a big domestic violence problem in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a growing number of suicides, and we are seeing the young children of this country act out. We're seeing the violence climbing in schools. They're beating the teachers. They beat the older man the other day, right? So when we speak about the need to heal Trinidad and Tobago, what are some of the practical steps that we can take to heal our country?
So we spoke about some of them, but I want to just identify, I'll go back and reiterate them, but I just want to identify the specific things we identified. Domestic violence is cultural trauma. Domestic violence is something that people learn to accept because it's normal. It's normal. Yeah?
Well, it's not normal to a lot of people,
So
but
it's not normal, but it's normal, right?
I know
Um,
it is a normal
mhm.
part of life in Trinidad and Tobago in that it exists, it's very frequent and people have become to a certain extent desensitized to it because there are, situations where, for example, a man beating his wife or his child or whatever, and people will say, well, that's not my business. Let me mind my business. Even the police,
Mhm.
they will tell it as personal. They don't want to get involved, right? So that is an example. Well, it more or less it actually reinforces what you are saying, and that is normal. It's all right. It happens,
And it's a
right?
helplessness, right? School violence is another one. Or suicidality is, I
Mm.
think many of those cases regularly. And the fact that the prevalence of it is increasing makes it worse. Because imagine when suicidality becomes desensitized. It is something I fear. It is something I absolutely fear because children will vape because all their friends are doing it. And
Don't
I'll just let you assume
go
the rest. I
down
will
there.
not
There.
dare
That.
say it.
Mhm.
But let's go back to some of what we can do. Practical examples of what we can do. The very first one is to allow yourself to recognize that you have a role to play. When things are going bad, it's really easy to say, that one doesn't do anything, that one doesn't do anything, that one is only saying. Even in our families, we say, an uncle likes something a certain way or whatever, and well, my aunt don't ever talk to him, and she's let him get away with that, and everybody talks about the problem, but nobody is eager to stand up, put their hands up, and say, I am part of this problem too. And so the absolute first thing we need to do is take responsibility and say, I am part of this problem too. And it's really easy to take a few steps back, take yourself out of it, and say, that's not my business, as you just said. That's not my business. I am not going to do anything about that. But in doing nothing about it, what you do by extension is you enable it to continue to happen. And so that responsibility part is a huge factor. And it's a huge thing for parenting as well. And going back to Donnie, Donnie chose to parent his children in a particular way. In order for him to do that, he would have had to think about it, make a decision, conceptualize what it might look like, and then execute that action. And after he did it one time, he would have had to do it repeatedly over years in order for him to see the impact of it. And so when we say take responsibility for something, it sounds really easy. It's one word, but taking responsibility is a lot of consistent effort over time. And so that is a huge thing, very difficult to do, but I would say absolutely the thing we need to do. The second thing, I really strongly believe that we need to target the parents. Now, I'm saying that not to say that I'm blaming parents. I am of the opinion that parents do not have the resources. And when I talk about resources, I'm not speaking about financial resources only. I am speaking about the these psychological skills to be able to manage children in this generation, because they speak a whole different language. I mean, I have two little ones, and sometimes I have to wonder, wait, what does that mean? Say it again in proper English so that mommy can understand, you know? So so I am a psychologist who specializes in parenting skills, and I have to train to teach my own two children just because of the generation difference between us, right? And so I now have to seek new resources in order to intentionally train them. Now, I'm someone who would have studied for many years on this, so I know that I have to do that, but there's no manual for parenting. So when you find out that you're pregnant and you go to the doctor, they don't give you a book and say, okay, well, this is the manual, you know, read it, look at the chapters. If you have any questions, come back to me. You learn as you go. And sometimes learning is just what seems most peaceful. And what seems most peaceful sometimes is hush, hush, go in your room and play. So that may be peaceful for you, but it impacts them. And when it impacts them, it creates a sense of isolation. And then when they're isolated, they need to find somewhere to belong. And when they're looking for somewhere to belong, but they don't have that security of a home, they may get in trouble in school. When they get in trouble in school, nobody wants to be their friends. So then they go outside looking for friends. And then that's where gang involvement starts. And I'm not saying that this is a formula for every single person, because different people are different, right? But then when they end up in a gang, they get a sense of belonging and they get a sense of worth. And they wouldn't have needed it at that point in time if they were sure they would have gotten it when they were a child. And that is why parenting is so important. That secure attachment with parents is extremely important. So if I had to say just two things, those are the two things that I would say. You know, there are a lot of plans to do a lot of things. You know, people want to try this and try that and all that. But I am not of the opinion that it can be done in isolation, because we are a society. We are not just a bunch of silos lined up next to each other. Everything impacts everything else. So we need to do it collectively, and we all need to be doing it at the same time. And I'll use this example. This example works in therapy, so I'll use it. If you have a marriage, you have two persons working on their marriage, and you have the wife working for 1 month and the husband is doing nothing and ignoring her. The wife does not feel motivated to continue working. So eventually the wife says, well, you know what? I'm putting out, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. It's not working. I'm feeling rejected. I'm feeling neglected. I'm feeling embarrassed. I'm feeling taken advantage of. I'm going to start seeing about me. And then for that 2nd month, the husband now starts doing everything he's supposed to be doing in the first place. But the wife is rejecting it because she's saying, oh, now you want to come and do that? Like, you're only doing that because I decided that I'm going to. And then the husband, on doing it, says, well, she not taking me on, so what's the sense doing it? Take that same relationship. They're both doing what they're supposed to do to heal their marriage at the same time. So one person's actions reinforces another person's actions, which then that person would be motivated to do something else. And so back and forth it goes until it builds and builds and builds and builds. So as a society, as Trinidad and Tobago, it can't be that we have the psychologists, we have the parents, and we have the teachers and the police officers and all of these people separate. Everybody needs to come together, but we need to come together at the same time. And we need to decide, hey, I'm going to take responsibility for myself and I'm going to do one thing differently this week. And even if it's a mind change, it doesn't need to be something actionable, but even if it's just when you're sitting in traffic, to say, you know what, I'm going to use this time, put on some meditation music and just deep breathe for 20 minutes, you know? So even if you do that one thing, that mind change, then it does affect your life. And when you are a less reactive individual, the persons around you will they won't be able to explode, right? If you respond quietly, then they're not going to react louder than you would have. And so if you're less reactive, then there's less reactivity in in your environment, and then there's generally more peace. But it all starts with one person taking responsibility for themselves. Could you imagine if every single person in Trinidad and Tobago took responsibility for one thing at the same time? That would be lovely. I would love to see that.
No, I like that. Everyone should take responsibility for themselves. And I do like that as a message, right? I am seeing a comment here that, made me laugh. And Darren is saying, let me see if I can find the comment. The comment from Darren, the trauma Trinidadians went through in the last decade, they're now taking it out on this government. Darren, anyway. But it is comical. It's funny. It made me laugh. I read it and I was just bursting out laughing, right? But I mean, he raises a valid point, that we would have gone through past trauma in previous relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
that trauma is still with us. And we
Mm-hmm.
now come and we move that trauma into present relationships. So Darren, your point is taken. Your point is taken. Right? Go ahead, Victoria.
So I was going to use that example and not make a comment with respect to anything political or the government, but just to say two things about that. Firstly, a person's perspective is their reality. So if someone experienced trauma or they perceive that they experience trauma, whatever it may be, then that becomes that person's reality. And now you can almost not hold that person for that emotion because every emotion is valid. So if there's a lack of trust, if there's anything like that, then you say, okay, that's valid. However, the action is something you have to take responsibility for. And that's the second thing. So, Alicia, I'll give you an example. If you say something and I misheard you, and I thought you were insulting me, and I got really angry at you, and then I picked up a mango and I threw it at your back. I'm not wrong for being angry at you because my perception is my reality. So in my mind, you really did insult me in a very horrible way. And I had an emotion. No emotions are invalid. So I had an emotion that is valid. I felt angry at you, right? But then when that emotion translates to a behavior and I throw something at you, now that's violence, right? That is where I go wrong. And
Yes.
part of monitoring ourselves. Nobody's saying don't be upset. Nobody's saying don't be angry. But the action that follows, the execution of that emotion, how you choose to express it, that is where a lot of us go wrong. But then what we do, we say, yeah, but I was really angry. I understand you're angry. Being angry is fine. You can be angry, you can be hurt, you can be anything. It's fine. All emotions are valid. But the actions that follow are the things that has the consequence. And so we need to be very cognizant about what our actions are. And that's where responsibility comes in again.
Okay, I just want to do a time check. It is now 8:53. I know, Victoria, you said you would be available until 9. And I want to just let our viewers know if you have any final questions, any comments, and so on. Now is the time to send it to us, right? Before you go, Victoria, I was wondering if you can share with us, being the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists, what are some of the upcoming initiatives that you all will have? Or anything, in fact, if you want to share anything about that association, I'm sure viewers would love to know.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So, first of all, I would share our contact information. You can find us online at www.psychologytt.org. We are also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So, you can visit those pages. Instagram usually has all the updates on everything comes through Instagram. We use Facebook for articles and LinkedIn for obvious professional things, but Instagram has all of our events, all of our engagements, all of our collaborations. So the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists is it's not a house under which you can come to find a psychologist like an office. But what we do is we vet psychologists in the country. And so all of our members would have been vetted. And if you visit our website, there's actually a directory on our website that you can go and you can click psychologist. And then you will see all of the psychologists that we have on our membership. And we also have allied professionals. So allied professionals are in the mental health field, but not psychologists. So these would be like art therapists, social workers, and so forth. So we also have a directory for allied professionals. We have a financial members listing as well. So you can always double check if you are seeing somebody. You can go on our financial members listing and you can double check to see if they are a member in good standing. There are a number of reasons why people may not be members in good standing. It could be as simple as they haven't paid their dues, or it could be that there was something, some type of misconduct or something like that, that constitutionally we would not be permitted to have them as a member until that is resolved. So I would highly recommend that if you are seeing a psychologist in Trinidad and Tobago, that you do visit our website and you check to see that they are financial members. And if they are not, you can ask them. Also, insurance only covers therapy that is through financial members of TTAP. So more than likely, if you have a provider, well, your insurance provider would not honor your claim if your psychologist is not a member of TTAP, because they normally will check in with us for that reason. I'm just going through the frequently asked questions in my mind. So TTAP, last year or for 2026, one of the drives that we have is collaboration. And for this year, we have been collaborating with the Ministry of Homeland Security, the Policy and Community Support Office in particular. And we are involved in many engagements with them. There's also engagements through that office with the Ministry of Social Development and the Ministry of Education. So in March of this year, we would have been honored to join the Crime Symposium, which was held in St. Augustine. And then in April, there was the first of the National Parenting Seminars, which was held in Trin City. And following, I'm happy to say, coming up, we have the second installment of the National Parenting Seminar, and also a seminar on empowering parents and caregivers of children and adolescents with disabilities. And both of those would be in July. So we are in the planning process for those. We're also moving over to Tobago to do a national parenting seminar there as well. So it's a lot of collaborations, and that is consistent with something that I mentioned before, that we can't function in silos. If we want to heal our country, we have to collaborate, we have to join together. And TTAP is very willing, more than willing, to work with associations, other organizations, nonprofit, state and non-state, to be able to advance mental health and wellness in Trinidad and Tobago.
That's some excellent stuff. Really, really excellent stuff. And I know, I mean, in speaking with you and so on, you are indeed an advocate for this greater collaboration and promoting the awareness and education and so on. And I have to say, once I approached Victoria, and I know how busy she is, I mean, she was, she was just so happy to come on the platform and share whatever information and knowledge she has with us. And well, Donnie, I know you will have a few words to say, but I just wanted to thank you for that, for just being so helpful to us and so willing to come and share your expertise with us. And just to let the viewers know, we will be having Victoria on a more regular basis, hopefully maybe once every 2 months, to talk about various mental health issues. We are indeed passionate about mental health and wellness on this program. So that is something that we are looking forward to very much. Donnie, maybe I don't know if you have a few words, and then we'll go to Victoria for closing comments.
Well, I just have 2 words, and if I were to sum this past hour up, I would say paradigm shifting. And I could definitely see the value of further engagements with you. It's something that I personally look forward to now. I think it was very eye-opening, and as I said, paradigm shifting. So thank you for tonight. Congratulations. It was a wonderful session, and we look forward to having you again.
And
Thank you very
Victoria, I want to invite you for any closing remarks that you may have, and before we lock off.
Sure. Yes, I was just going to say thank you very much. And, to your viewers, if you were taking notes, and I really hope that you were, everything happens one step at a time. And sometimes we don't have the extra resources in our lives to do big steps. So sometimes it could be small steps. And that small step could be something as simple as remembering to take your vitamin C on a morning, or to make sure you drink 2 liters of water per day, because physical health is equally important to mental health, right? But one very small thing, it does not have to be mental health related. It does not have to be parenting related. It does not have to be anything related. One small decision that you make that you know is going to affect your life for the positive if you continue to do it. And I'll tell you something, after you're successful with that one, it's going to motivate you and empower you to do another one. And then when you're successful there, it will motivate you and empower you to do another one. And so that's how you change. Lasting, consistent change. Thank you very much. It was a joy to be on your program. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, our discussion tonight was based on cultural trauma. And again, I want to thank Mrs. Victoria Siewnarine-Geelalsingh, President of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists, and also a clinical psychologist for over a decade, for joining us. She shared some very valuable insights and information with us. So I want to thank her again for that. I want to thank all of you all who would have tuned in on social media, Facebook, YouTube, as well as who joined us on Zoom. And please stay tuned for more episodes. Join us again at 8 p.m. on Tuesday for another episode of One on One, where we will be bringing some important issues on the table. Thank you and good night.
Have a good night.